There are a number of effects in Reason that take up half a rack space, and they're called, get ready for it, half rack effects. You can see a whole slew of them here in my Tools window. What I've done here is taken a subtractor, which has a mono output, and routed it to a spider, and then sent it out stereo output. That's one use for a spider. You don't necessarily need that. As we've seen, many of the effects will do that automatically. And then I've routed each effect to the next in a chain, and if they were all on, then the subtractor would go through every single one of them. But I have them all set to bypass, so the signal is passing through all of them and then back to the mixer. So now, when I bypass this last EQ, we'll hear just the native signal. So first, the PEQ2, a 2-band parametric EQ. I can adjust frequency, I can adjust gain, I can adjust the Q, which is the width of the curve, and I can turn on a second band by clicking the B switch. And like all of our effects, certain parameters can be automated. In this case, we can automate either frequency 1 or frequency 2 or both, and this allows us to do things like frequency sweeps, which are very easy to do if you hook a matrix, for example, to the BEQ2. Next up, the Comp01, which is a simple compressor. You set a ratio, a threshold over which the compressor acts, and then an attack and release time for the compressor. And there's a gain meter on the right-hand side. Then we have Unison. Unison allows you to create copies of the input, slightly detuned, and what you get is a thicker sound. Now we can set the number of voices and the amount of dry versus wet signal. We can also set the detuning. So that's 4 voices. This is 16. That's 8. So that's the UN16 Unison. Reason has an advanced reverb, but it also has a simpler reverb that's been around since the early days of Reason. We can set the type of room. We can also click and drag in that area just to see the different algorithms. And then once we have the type of room, we can change the room size, the decay of the reverb, the damping of the reverb, and the dry and wet signal. Usually a reverb is used as a send effect with wet set all the way up to 100%. Next comes the D11 fold back distortion, a simple distortion effect. The Scream distortion is a much more powerful distortion unit. Then we have the phaser, and we can adjust frequency, amount, width, we can sync the rate to tempo, and we can even have it feedback on itself. The chorus flanger effect can also be synced to tempo, and we have different controls, including a send mode, which allows me to just output the process signal with no dry signal. There's a nice delay unit, the DDL1, that lets me sync a delay to my tempo. I can choose to put in a millisecond amount and not sync to tempo, or put in a number of steps, sync to tempo, and a step length. The DDL1 is one effect unit that really benefits when you hook things into the back of the unit. For example, you can control panning and do sweeps of your delay, and you can control the amount of feedback. Lastly, we have the ECF42, an envelope-controlled filter. When you don't have anything hooked into it, it's a basic filter. But in order to control it by an envelope, we need to send some information into it. And we can use a matrix to do that. So let's add a matrix to this ECF42, and then we can see how the envelope control works. So here is my matrix. We must send in gate information, which we have, and then we can send in curve information to our frequency or to our decay or our rate or something else. And let's draw in a curve. And we need to play our subtractor. So you can start to see how the gate and the curve are affecting the sound of the filter. We can shape the envelope from the front panel, and we can adjust settings on the back panel to determine how much my input will affect the frequency, resolution, and so forth. So the ECF42 has a built-in envelope generator, but it can be used with pattern devices like the matrix or the redrum to control your filter and envelope effects. Of course, you could trigger it with MIDI or use it just as a basic filter without an envelope. And that's an intro to the half-rack effects in Reason.